I was born at home, attended by our family doctor on May 9th, 1910, to Fred J. and Susanna Bittner Morris. Dad was a kind man. He was honest and industrious. Dad worked for ZCMI as a traveling salesman, with Utah and Idaho being his territory. Integrity was the motto of his life. I can only remember 2 times that my dad was ever angry with me. Once when I had taken our first car out on a date and had left it parked in the avenue while I opened the garage. The brakes slipped and the car rolled down and hit Tanner's front porch, smashing the right fender, which I had to pay to be repaired. The second time he was angry with me was when we had borrowed a big ladder from Uncle Ern Evans, and I was painting up under the eaves of the house when the ladder slipped and down I fell. The first thing he wanted to know when I told him about it was if there was any damage to the borrowed ladder. Mother was a great woman, a great reader of good books, an avid genealogy worker, an ardent church worker, and she was loved by all who knew her. Mother had boundless energy. She was never idle, and even when you were visiting with Mother, she was doing needlework or crocheting. She was on the Ensign State Mutual Board for 10 years. Her department was the gospel doctrine, along with professors and learned men, and Mother was one who could match wits with any of them. Mother was a frugal woman. She was diligent and prayerful. She always had a project going, sometimes without Dad even knowing about it, until it was completed. She kept a little black book in which she showed each month's receipts and expenditures. The first item on each month was tithing, and even though during the Depression and times were tough, she paid an honest tithe. My childhood memories include Mother saying that when I was about 4 years old on my birthday, nobody had been invited to my birthday party. So my older sister Florence invited her school friends home, and we had a birthday party for me. I went to Stewart Training School along with my sister Florence, who said that she would have to carry me up the hill there. Often in the winter, it was so cold the boiler would break, and they would send us home from school. In 7th grade, I went up to the Wasatch School, which was much closer to where I lived. When I was 12 years old, I think I had my first Deseret newspaper out. From then on, I always bought my own clothes and paid for my own entertainment. I went to Bryant Junior High for 9th grade, where I met Stan Christensen, who became my good friend and whose father owned Christensen Construction Company. I was offered a job the summer following 9th grade to go out to Dot Cerro to be a flunky. I don't know how many of you know what a flunky is. As a flunky, we would wait on the table and set them and peel potatoes and do the dishes and everything else. I imagine that's where I got my first experience of doing all these things and why I'm so good at them now. I stayed there all summer, and there wasn't any place to spend our money, and as they paid me $60 a month, at the end of the summer, I had $180. The following summer, I was offered a job with Christensen's, and this time I was a truck checker. I would sit up on the hill at a vantage point, and as the truck went by, they had a number, and I'd keep track of the numbers and the number of loads each truck made. I came up through the different quorums of the priesthood, and always seemed to be president of the quorum, and of course, in the priest quorum, I was first assistant to the bishop. I went to LDS High School and graduated from there in 1928. I was called on my mission and received my call to the Hawaiian Islands in May of 1930. We went by train to Los Angeles and left from San Pedro. I can remember Aunt Della being at the boat, and all of us throwing long streamers from the boat to the people down below who were watching the boat go out as the band played Aloha Oi. That was on June 7th on the SS Kalawai when we left for Hawaii. We were on the boat for 7 full days, and on June 14th, the following Saturday, we landed at Honolulu at the Aloha Pier. I met some lifetime friends in the mission field who I still associate with. My heart has always been in Hawaii. Those people over there are so generous and so kind and so loving. You can't help but fall in love with them. The longer you are in Hawaii, the more you love the land and the people. In August 1932, I was released, and my folks met me up in Vancouver, British Columbia with the car.
I was born on July 3, 1910, in the LDS hospital to Charles P. and Catherine Elizabeth Rigby Margetts. My mother was 41 years old when I was born, and my brother Phil was born 3 years after, making my parents pretty old to be raising two young children, but they never seemed too old to give us plenty of love and attention. As my mother was in the hospital waiting for my birth, the doctor told her that if she waited a little longer, she would have a little 4th of July firecracker. But she wasn't interested in that and told the doctor to get me here as soon as possible. So I came into the world on July 3rd at 11:45 p.m., a little early to be a firecracker. But I remember that when I was young, I always thought that the 4th of July celebration was because of my birthday. Up until I was about 9 months old, my mother said I was a very cross baby, and I'm sure she must have been very frustrated at the time, taking care of a crying baby and the rest of her large family, along with being a bishop's wife, which was a great responsibility. My dad was a great man, a very devoted husband and father, kind, compassionate, and also full of fun. He worked for ZCMI for several years, Dinwiddie Furniture, and later became owner of Margette's Coal Company. Dad was bishop of the 6th and 7th Ward for 26 years and loved the people, and they loved him. No matter how busy he was, he found time to spend with his family. He loved to fish and hunt. I'll always remember the time he came home from Utah Lake with a gunny sack full of catfish, and most of them were still alive. Instead of doing away with them, Dad filled the bathtub full of water and dumped the fish in it. There they stayed for several days. Our fish pond was the talk of the ward and neighborhood, and everyone had to come see it. Mother finally decided that she should cook some of them. Dad killed them, Mother cooked them, and none of us could eat them. They had almost become like pets. Mother was a beautiful woman, a little quiet and very reserved. Her home and family were most important to her. However, before she was married, she was the ward organist, oil painted, and was a member of the tabernacle choir, which was a great experience for her. She was a hard worker, made all of our clothes, filled all of the bottles with fruits and jams during the summer, and kept our home neat and clean, as well as our clothing. Everything she did was a little harder than it could have been, as she had rheumatism and eczema on her hands for as long as I can remember. She sang in the ward choir and loved visiting teaching, but other than that, she supported Dad in his bishop's duties by always being available with meals and other projects which took so much of her time. When I was very young, we had a horse and a buggy with fringe on top. The horse's name was Nancy. We used to take many rides in the country. We really loved that horse, and we were very sad when we gave her up and purchased a car, which we felt so excited about, as we were about the first family in the neighborhood to own one. When I was 6 years old and had just started school, I suddenly came down with a disease that even our doctor couldn't understand. My bones ached and I couldn't move my arms or legs. At that time, they knew nothing about rheumatic fever or polio. The doctor finally diagnosed it as rheumatism, but he couldn't understand how anyone as young as I could have such a disease. The pain was pretty bad, and I was in bed for about 10 weeks. The doctor didn't know how to treat me. He came every day and took my temperature and gave strict orders that I was to stay in bed. And I guess that because of the long rest in bed and the many administrations, faith and prayers of my family, friends, and members of the ward, I regained my health and strength. I had to learn to walk again, and for many months after, Mother made me come in and rest every afternoon. This upset me as I felt very good, but I'm sure I have her to thank that my heart was never damaged because of this disease. Each time I have been interviewed by doctors, and I tell them about this illness, they are amazed that my heart has thus far never given me any troubles. I attended school at Grant School on First West, between 5th and 6th South, where the Hilton Hotel now stands. With the exception of arithmetic and art, I did fairly well and had some very special teachers. In junior high school at West Junior High, I remember one teacher who used to throw erasers at students when they did something wrong. Geometry was my hardest subject there, and it's a good thing that the teacher liked me a little, as he barely passed me, knowing I would never understand the subject. In 1927, I entered LDS High School. I sang in the chorus, and for 2 years we put on operas in the old Salt Lake Theater. And as we were performing there, I couldn't help but think of my Grandpa Margette's, who performed there many years before. After attending LDS Business College for a time, I did work for Dad at his coal office. Later, I worked at Baker's shoe store. I enjoyed this as there was such a great group of people working there, and I made many friends. I also worked for my brother-in-law, Bing Young, and another architect during the week and worked Saturdays at Baker's until after I was married and pregnant with Karen.
When Wayne was on his mission, I chased around, had a lot of friends and things, but I always said that I wanted to marry a tall, dark, returned missionary. But I didn't know who it was going to be at that time.
Well, the first time I ever met her was when she dated a good friend of mine. And he was supposed to get us some blind dates, and we were all going out to the old mill to dance. Well, by the time we got around to it, our dates had all gone to bed. But Miriam was there with my friend Dave Fisher. So
And we went out to the old mill, and I had 3 good-looking men to dance with.
A good friend, Ralph Peterson, and he had married this Carol Morgan. And so they, when I first came back from Hawaii, they said they had a girl they wanted me to meet. So they introduced me to Miriam, and about 4 years later, we had our first kiss.
How did Grandpa ask you?
You mean when he proposed?
Yes,
Gosh, how did he? I think he probably said, I think he said, I've got a day off on Washington's birthday, maybe we better get married.
No.
Lincoln's birthday.
I said, I've wasted all my money on you, and I haven't any more money, but if you want to marry me, you better speak up now.
Well, now that wasn't fine either.
We became engaged in December and were married February 12, 1936 in the Salt Lake Temple, which was a very beautiful occasion. Neither Wayne nor I wanted a reception, and because the Depression had been rough on Dad's business, I didn't feel that they should spend a lot on our wedding. So after the ceremony, my parents had a wedding breakfast at our home for both families. The week before our wedding, Wayne came down with a flu, and guess I must have gotten it from him, so neither of us felt very well. After the breakfast, we started out for Las Vegas, which of course was nothing like it is now, but we wanted to see it and the construction of Hoover Dam. By the time we reached Provo, the heater in our car wasn't working too well, and we both felt so miserable that we tried to go into a hotel there. But it was full, so we drove a few miles south to Springville, where we found a small hotel. The owner, knowing we were newlyweds, gave us the bridal suite. Well, you should have seen it. 1 room with a bathroom down the hall. That was our honeymoon suite. We didn't feel much better the next day, so we came on back to Salt Lake and got ourselves settled in our first home, the Del Roya Apartments on 3rd South between 3rd and 4th East.
At the time, I was working for the Utah State Liquor Commission, receiving the big salary of $85 a month. We also had a furniture bill, as we had bought some furniture at Dinwiddie's. We don't go for cheap stuff, of course. Dinwiddie's was probably the most expensive furniture store in Salt Lake at that time. So we had to make payments there and pay $32.50 a month for rent.
We moved 11 times, and Miriam's cousin, Ralph Howell, said that every time the rent came due, we moved. Which wasn't so. Every time Miriam saw a mouse or something, we had to move. I remember one place we were on, 329 South 3rd East, and she saw a mouse on the steps, a dead mouse, so right away we had to move.
On June 22nd, 1937, our first daughter Karen was born at the LDS hospital. She was the darkest baby in the nursery, with real black hair and dark brown eyes, and we thought she was beautiful. We enjoyed Karen so much. I loved to dress her up and take her walking in her big wicker buggy. Many of Wayne's friends told him that he would never be seen pushing that buggy, but inasmuch as we lived close to town, I would push her to meet him after work, and he would proudly push it home again. She was the first grandchild for Wayne's folks, Fred and Susanna Morris, and all of the family loved to babysit Karen. Karen loved to read, and I spent many hours reading to her. Sometimes it would even be the evening paper. I'm sure this is what has contributed to her love of books and reading, and has helped her become the good student she has always been. She married Richard Poland at age 18. We felt she was too young, and Dick was just 21, but it has been a very good marriage. They have 5 beautiful children. Kay was born on August 14, 1940, in the LDS hospital. She was certainly a good baby and didn't cause us any trouble. Kay was such a good baby that I sometimes wondered if there was something wrong with her, as she very seldom cried. This was a great blessing, as just a few months after her birth my mother fell and broke her leg. This led to many complications which led to her death. With the many trips to the hospital and preparations for the funeral, I was glad that Kay was good-natured enough that I could leave her and Karen with my cousins, Catherine and Madge, who practically took them over during that sad time. For a while we weren't sure about the color of Kay's eyes, but they soon turned brown, and her hair was blonde and curly. People commented on her curly hair, which I guess must have upset Karen, who was used to all of the attention. So one day, while I was in the basement for a few minutes, I returned to find all of Kay's hair in the front gone. Of course we knew who did it, but Karen would never tell us what she did with it. I eventually found it in the cold air vent. Kay looked pretty funny without any hair in front, but it soon grew out. Kay had many friends and progressed well in school along with many activities. Pep Club, a delegate to Girls State, and an officer in the Girls Club at South High. She married Ward Barnes, April 20th, 1965, in the Salt Lake Temple, and later had a reception at Crestwood Villa. They have 6 children.
In 1940, I was given a chance to work in the city courts in the Salt Lake City and County building. I worked there for 3 years. During that time, I took the post office exam, and on April 1st, 1942, went to work for them at the main post office as a sub. After a year and a half of subbing at the post office, I finally got my appointment as a postal clerk, which allowed me more privileges than before and guaranteed 8 hours a day. On December 24th, 1943, Judy was born. I'll never forget that day, as the 24th of December was the day you really wanted to clean up everything at work. I arrived at work about 6 a.m. that morning. At about 6:20, I got a phone call saying to come home and take Miriam to the hospital. I hurried home and we got up to the LDS hospital, where about 1.5 hours later, Judy was born. Now I'll tell you how I got extra time working at the post office. Judy was such a colicky baby and cried for about 11 months straight, in fact. I used to get so nervous hearing her cry that I would take any overtime that came along.
Judy was a beautiful baby with big brown eyes, dark hair, and a nice round head. For the first 8 months of her life, she was very cross, and the doctor told us she was allergic to everything but her formula. We finally changed doctors, and as soon as we told him what formula she was taking, he said that was her whole problem. From then on, she was a very good-natured and happy baby, and we really enjoyed her. She was the only one of the girls who really liked dolls, and she would content herself for hours playing with them and her good friends, Linda Magnum and Luana Belliston. When in elementary school, Judy for some reason or other hated the boys and really let them know it when they came around. But as she grew older, her attitude changed, and for a while, our house was pretty filled with boys from our area. She had a nice voice and sang in the a cappella choir at Highland High. After graduating from Highland, she attended Utah State College for a while. Then she started working at the telephone company as a secretary, where she met her husband, Joseph Mancy, and have 3 beautiful little girls.
When Judy was about 18 months old, we purchased a home at 1363 Zenith Avenue. This was a brand new home. We had many good neighbors there. The Mangums and Bellistons had children about the same age as ours, and we all had so many good times on picnics and weekends at Bear Lake. If we had been given the chance to choose our neighborhood, I don't think we could have ever chosen one with so many nice people.
At 50, Wayne was working 2 jobs. This was getting a little bit too much, so I decided it was time for me to contribute a little to the family finances. So I went to work at the Paris department store, where I worked for 18 years in the credit office. Wayne gave one of his jobs up and worked nights at the post office. This way, the girls were not alone for too long a time.
When I first came home from my mission, I was recruited as a Sunday school teacher for 13 and 14-year-olds. My next assignment was Teachers Quorum Advisor. I was then assigned as first counselor in the Sunday school presidency. After we moved to our home on Zenith Avenue, I again taught Sunday school and later on was first counselor in the Sunday school presidency. Grandma's service included mutual, Sunday school teacher, first counselor in primary, primary president, first counselor in Relief Society, and then 3 years as Relief Society president.
This was the greatest, most challenging, and most rewarding responsibility of my life, of course with the exception of running a home and raising my family. I learned to know and love the sisters in the ward and felt they were all my close friends.
After 31 years on Zenith Avenue, on September 3rd, 1975, we moved to a brand new condo which we had purchased on Terra Lane in Holiday. We lived in Holiday First Ward, and it was so strange going to church where we didn't know anyone. There are lovely people in Terra Gardens, and most of them are like us, senior citizens. Our children and grandchildren love to come and take advantage of our swimming pool.
Memories, we've went on a few good trips together.
Yeah, we've taken some really nice trips. Not out of the country, only to Canada, but we take a lot of nice tours.
Even went to Hawaii.
During the past years, we have had some lovely trips. We have taken a tour to Hawaii, where we visited all the islands, Alaska, the Northwest, and Canada. We took a tour of the South from New Orleans, Orlando, Miami, Nashville, and Memphis, Tennessee, and many other interesting places. What beautiful country this is.
We have been fortunate in having some very good friends. Some of these friendships have lasted over 50 years. Like our bridge club, which meets every other Saturday. We go out to dinner with another couple every Wednesday, and afterwards play bridge alternating at each other's homes.
We were sure lucky. We had 3 beautiful girls, and they sure have taken good care of their parents.
What's some of that good advice, Grandpa?
Well, if you ever get in an argument with your wife, compromise her way.
Well, I just better not go into that.
Grandma's attitude is marry a rich man to start with. Any other questions?
Our marriage for the most part has been great, and I give Miriam the credit for the raising of our 3 daughters, as during their formative years I was working most of the time. Looking back to the time when our daughters lived at home, they caused us very little trouble and have each chosen good mates to be the father of their children. So far, the grandchildren have turned out well, and to our knowledge have never used drugs, which are so prevalent among teenagers today. I have never made a great amount of money, but we have never gone hungry, and both Miriam and I are slightly obese. The only thing I can leave my children is a good heritage and hope that their children can also say they too were born of goodly parents.
I can't believe how fast the time has gone. We really appreciate and love our daughters and their families, for their love and concern for us, and for their devotion to the gospel. This is a very important part of their lives, and I'm sure they will be blessed for their good works. When I hear of the horrible problems taking place in some families, I feel that we must have done something right in our lives to be blessed with such great children and grandchildren. Who could ask for more?